Since the beginning of the season, the team's rotation has raised questions. With the departures of Oshae Brissett and Mykhailiuk, a shortage at the wing position became evident. Joe Mazzulla's response was clear, using lineups with two big men to fill that gap. But this solution is far from ideal in the long run. While the team remains dominant, the lack of versatile bench options could become a problem in the playoffs, where tactical adjustments and roster balance make all the difference. And here's the critical point. The Celtics have no room for bold moves in the market. As a team that has exceeded the NBA's second salary cap level, its options for strengthening the roster are extremely limited. This means that any move must be surgical, and the only piece that truly holds trade value without compromising the core is Jaden Springer's expiring contract, valued at $4 million. Given this scenario, an interesting name has emerged behind the scenes: Mykhailiuk of the Portland Trail Blazers. ESPN analyst Bobby Marks proposed a solution that could improve the team's depth without jeopardizing the franchise's financial future. The idea would be as follows. The Celtics receive Mykhailiuk. The Trail Blazers receive Jaden Springer, a 2025 first-round pick, and a 2030 second-round pick. Marks's argument is straightforward. If Boston is going to trade Springer, the priority should be acquiring a wing who can defend multiple positions and help reduce costs. And Kamara's numbers support this thesis. The Belgian wing averages 9.6 points per game and ranks in the 85th percentile for steals among wings in the league, according to Cleaning the Glass. Moreover, his contract is extremely affordable, a non-guaranteed $2.2 million salary next season and a team option of $2.4 million for 2026-27. The central question is, would adding Kamara significantly transform the Celtics bench? Defensively, he brings exactly what the team needs: a versatile defender capable of guarding multiple positions, fitting perfectly into the team's physical identity. But offensively, he is not a great creator, and his ability to space the floor remains inconsistent. This means that, while useful, he would not completely solve the lack of depth in the rotation. Additionally, giving up a 2025 first-round pick for a player who is far from being an established name could be risky. If there's one thing Brad Stevens has been cautious about, it's the valuation of future assets. Is it really worth sacrificing a future draft piece for a player who, at best, would be a role player? The Celtics' bench issues are not just about finding a player to fill the wing position. The team also needs more offensive creativity off the bench, something neither Peyton Pritchard nor Sam Hauser can provide consistently, and Kamara wouldn't solve that issue. If Boston truly wants to strengthen its roster, perhaps it needs to think bigger. Targets like Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith, or even a veteran like Kyle Anderson could be more complete options to meet the team's needs. But then another question arises. To what extent is it worth changing a roster that has already proven it can compete at a high level? Could Kamara be the solution? In theory, a player like Kamara makes sense. He won't change the franchise's fate, but he can offer exactly what the Celtics need: a versatile, athletic defender capable of guarding multiple positions and bringing energy to the second unit. Right now, Boston has a talented bench, but it lacks defensive depth on the perimeter and struggles to maintain intensity when the starters leave the court. Kamara has already shown interesting flashes in Portland. He's averaging 9.6 points per game and ranks in the 85th percentile for steals among wings, according to Cleaning the Glass. Additionally, his contract is extremely team-friendly. He will earn just $2.2 million next season and has a $2.4 million team option for 2026-27. For a team like the Celtics, already deep in luxury tax, this is one of the few viable ways to add an impactful player without further complicating the payroll. But does he truly solve the Celtics' problems? Although Kamara is a solid defender, his offensive game remains a question mark. He is not a reliable shooter, doesn't create for teammates, and at times could become a non-factor on offense. The Celtics already struggle when they don't have ideal spacing. Adding a player who isn't a perimeter threat could make things even more complicated. If the goal is to strengthen the bench, Boston should aim for a player who, besides defending, also provides some level of offensive creation. The ideal target would be a more established 3-and-D wing, like Royce O'Neal or Dorian Finney-Smith, but those players would cost far more than what Boston can currently offer. So, if the Kamara trade happens, it must come with a plan B. Otherwise, the bench issue will persist. Is Springer being prepped for a trade? If there's any indication that something is happening behind the scenes, it's the increased playing time for Jaden Springer. Until January, he was merely a deep rotation player. Suddenly, he started getting more minutes. Coincidence? Highly unlikely. Kevin O'Connor of Yahoo Sports was straightforward. "I've heard that the Celtics are willing to trade him. It seems like they're trying to boost his value in the market." The numbers support this theory. Against the Chicago Bulls, Springer played 19 minutes, more than usual, contributing 4 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. A modest performance, but enough to show he could be useful to another team. If Boston is indeed preparing Springer for a trade, the team has some viable options. Besides Kamara, 2 other interesting names have been speculated: Day'Ron Sharpe and Walker Kessler. Both are young defensive big men who could strengthen the Celtics' front court, particularly with playoff intensity in mind. When rotations shorten and games become more physical, the big question is, should Boston really spend its few available assets on a player like Kamara or a backup center? Does the Celtics really need this trade? This is a tough decision. Does the current roster have enough talent to win another title? Yes. But does it have enough depth to survive a long playoff run against opponents who will exploit every weakness? That's the dilemma. If Brad Stevens truly believes that the current rotation can compete at a high level in the playoffs, perhaps the best strategy is to keep the assets and avoid a rushed trade. But if there's concern that the lack of defensive and offensive options off the bench could prove costly, then a move must happen, and soon. The question is, bet on Kamara and hope he fits, or aim for something bigger, even if it means sacrificing valuable assets. The loss to the Rockets showed what could happen in the playoffs. If there was still any doubt about the need for a trade, the game against the Houston Rockets served as a red alert for the Boston Celtics. A team that wants to defend its title simply cannot make the mistakes we saw in the final stretch of that game. It was a scenario that, if repeated in the playoffs, could be costly. Boston dominated most of the game, but failed in the decisive moments. And that is the difference between a championship team and one that falls short before the finals. And the most concerning part? This wasn't an isolated case. Dillon Brooks, a player known more for his defense than his offense, had the best offensive night of his career, scoring 36 points and making 10 three-pointers. No defensive adjustment was enough to stop him. In the final seconds, with the game still undecided, Amen Thompson drove past Jaylen Brown with ease and scored the game-winning basket with just 1 second left on the clock. Can these mistakes be explained by the natural wear and tear of the regular season? Yes. But in the playoffs, there's no margin for this kind of failure. If Boston makes the same mistakes in a series against the Bucks, Knicks, or Cavaliers, the dream of back-to-back championships could end before the NBA Finals even begin. After the game, Joe Mazzulla didn't shy away from responsibility. In an interview, he took the blame for the loss. "Those last 2 plays were my fault. I didn't put the team in the best situations. Our defense was really good for most of the game, but I didn't help them close it out." It's a statement that shows leadership, but also exposes something troubling. Boston still hasn't found solutions for its recurring problems. This was the team's 4th loss in the last 7 games, and the pattern has been the same. Starters wearing down, inconsistency from the bench, and struggles to close out tight games. Last year, Boston won in the playoffs because it had defensive answers for every critical situation. Now, those answers aren't as clear. Center or versatile wing. With the trade deadline approaching, the Boston Celtics find themselves at a crossroads. The team needs reinforcements, but which area should be the priority? The front court is a real concern, but the lack of depth attacking the wing position is also an issue that could prove costly in the playoffs. Among the rumored names, 2 centers stand out: Day'Ron Sharpe of the Brooklyn Nets and Walker Kessler of the Utah Jazz. Both are young physical players who can protect the rim, exactly what Boston's rotation is missing. The need for a backup center has been evident throughout the season. Kristaps Porzingis has missed multiple games due to injuries, and at 37 years old, Al Horford cannot be overburdened. Every time Porzingis is out, Boston is forced to improvise, often playing with smaller lineups that weaken the defense and limit rim protection. This situation is unsustainable in the playoffs. Against teams like the Milwaukee Bucks and Philadelphia 76ers, which have dominant front-court players, Boston needs a reliable defensive presence off the bench. But the problem isn't just in the paint. The Celtics bench also lacks a versatile wing who can defend multiple positions and contribute offensively. This is where another name makes sense: Javonte Green of the New Orleans Pelicans. Green previously played for the Celtics and left a strong impression. He brings energy, intense defense, and the ability to guard both perimeter and interior players. Additionally, his contract is affordable, making him a viable option for a team already operating above the salary cap. A player like Green might seem like a modest addition, but in the playoffs, every rotation piece matters. If Boston faces physical wings like Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jimmy Butler, or Mikal Bridges, a versatile defender off the bench could be crucial to balancing the defense and preventing excessive fatigue for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Insider Brett Siegel of Clutch Points noted that a trade involving Jaden Springer could not only bring a defensive reinforcement, but also provide financial relief. Boston is above the second tax apron, meaning any adjustment could save millions in penalties. But there's a risk here. If the Celtics make a trade purely for financial reasons without bringing in real talent to strengthen the team, they could jeopardize their title chances. Brad Stevens has a tough decision ahead. Should he prioritize a center to solve the frontcourt issues or a wing to improve the team's defensive depth? The best solution might be to pursue both. If Boston is aggressive in the market and acquires both a center and a versatile wing, the team will enter the playoffs with a more balanced roster, prepared to take on any challenge. The trade that could define the season, Boston's 114-112 loss to the Houston Rockets, was a wake-up call, but not because of the close score or a simple regular season stumble. What was seen on the court was a much more concerning issue, something that has been recurring and could threaten the team's title hopes. The rotation is not up to championship standards. When the starters can't carry the team alone, the bench needs to step up, but that hasn't been happening. Against the Rockets, Peyton Pritchard did his part, scoring 15 points off the bench. But aside from him, the rest of the second unit, including Jaden Springer, combined for just 7 points. This isn't a minor detail. It's a pattern, a problem that had been emerging and is now fully exposed. And that raises the big question: does the Celtics roster have enough depth for a long and grueling playoff run? If the answer is no, and all signs point to that, then Brad Stevens needs to act. With a payroll exceeding $180 million, it simply doesn't make sense to enter the playoffs so dependent on the starters. If the Celtics truly want to defend their title, they need to make adjustments. And this necessity could be pushing the team toward an inevitable move. Jaden Springer might be on his way out. Jaden Springer, trade asset or future piece. Not long ago, Jaden Springer was just an end-of-the-rotation name, but suddenly, his minutes on the court have increased. He's been getting more opportunities, playing in crucial situations. That didn't happen by accident. According to Kevin O'Connor of Yahoo Sports, the Celtics might be deliberately showcasing Springer for the trade market. What I've heard is that the Celtics are willing to move him. He's been playing more lately, and I imagine the team is trying to highlight him for potential trades. In other words, what seemed like a simple rotation shift might actually be a strategic move. The Celtics aren't just testing Springer, they're advertising him to the league. Now, the most important question: who can Boston target in return? The names that make sense on the market: Walker Kessler, Utah Jazz, and Day'Ron Sharpe, Brooklyn Nets, for the front court, and Javonte Green, New Orleans Pelicans, for the wing rotation. Kessler, for example, would solve two issues at once: rim protection and rebounding. He's young, athletic, and has already shown he can be an elite defender. Sharp, on the other hand, would provide Boston with a physical presence to hold down the paint when Porzingis is unavailable. Javonte Green, who previously played for the Celtics, would bring exactly what's missing from the bench: aggressive, defense, and versatility. But another factor may be influencing this potential trade: money. According to Brett Siegel of Clutch Points, moving Springer could save Boston millions. The team is already operating above the second tax apron and needs to balance its finances. But that's the big question. Is Boston willing to part with Springer just to cut costs, or will they use him to strengthen the roster? Hey Celtics fanatics, what do you think of this news? Leave your opinion in the comments, as it's highly valued.